So we don't need you to save us, because actually we can sort of save ourselves if you're with us. And that's the kind of hero we want, is someone who's exactly the same as us. And our salvation is going to come from teamwork.
Welcome to Popcorn Parenting, the podcast about movies, mythology and the Messiah, or in the case of today's movie, heroes, villains and creativity. I'm joined by co-host and fellow Red Carpet UK premiere attendee, reformed mythologist Nate Morgan Locke. Hello, Nate.
Hello, James. I'm glad you're still wearing your tuxedo from our red carpet experience.
Absolutely. Haven't taken it off since.
Don't let the magic fade too soon. That's the rule.
The magic might have faded with the cold, hard facts. Here we go as we start most of our movies, most of our podcasts. The cold, hard facts about the movie Lightyear. Which is what we're talking about today. Just been released by Pixar, now owned by Disney, directed by Angus MacLane, who co-directed Finding Dory, which is a perfectly serviceable sequel to a really good film, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It features the vocal stylings of Chris Evans, Keke Palmer, Peter Sohn, James Brolin, Taika Waititi. It cost $200 million to make, and at the box office it took... Well, who knows? We're recording this the day before official box office figures would start to be counted, because we were at the premiere. I don't know if we mentioned that.
We might have done, but just in case we haven't, James and I went to the premiere, the UK premiere of Disney Pixar's Lightyear.
Yeah, we're particularly proud of that just because we'd thought about it and we didn't really expect it to come off, but it did. So we managed to see the show ahead of time. So there will be some spoilers. Now, if you want a bit of an overall taste of the movie, then listen to the previous episode, which was a quick reaction without spoilers. But this is a bit more of a deep dive. And Nate, why don't you kick us off by talking about heroes?
Heroes. Well, exactly. That's kind of what the idea of a film like Lightyear should be, is a film about a hero named Buzz Lightyear. So when you start the film, the text on the screen, not quite a kind of Star Wars episode scroll, but certainly the information you're given from the outset is that in 1995, a boy named Andy was given a Buzz Lightyear toy, and this is the movie that inspired the gift. So, yeah, we're watching the film that apparently in 1995 young Andy watched, and then after which he was given this new heroic action figure of Buzz Lightyear, the Space Ranger. So really I was hoping for a hero film in which our hero overcame the odds to use his training, skills and quick thinking to save the day and restore peace and harmony to the galaxy. And I didn't really feel it did that. I feel as though, in lots of ways, this is a film that undermines heroism, or the idea of a single hero who could save us. And from my point of view, I think Lightyear, it probably isn't the right name for the film, given the story that they're telling. It's not really about Buzz Lightyear. It's much more about the team of Space Rangers.
Yeah. I mean, another title for this movie could be "Don't Be a Hero." You know, if it wasn't, if it wasn't called Lightyear, and you had to sum up what the movie actually was, then you would probably say it's about not being a hero. So, the idea that this is an inspiring film for Andy to go out and get the action figure is, I mean, it's simply a disconnect.
Yeah.
And maybe that doesn't matter, but if you're going to set it up at the start, then don't be surprised. You know, the first words of text on the screen, we are going to read them because we're quite excited, and we are going to believe them. So an awful lot. So the overall moral of the story, as it were, is not particularly toxic. You know, learn to accept help.
Yes, well,
that's fine. Make a movie about that, but don't make the Lightyear movie that.
No, not at all. And in that sense, I thought, well, that wasn't that much fun. It felt quite on the nose, and it wasn't a sentiment that was, you know, sort of gradually revealed through the film. The action kind of unearthed this great truth that we all need to accept, help, and work together. It was there from the opening scene. And it was explicitly mentioned from the opening scene. And so Buzz goes out onto this planet they've just come to check out with Alicia Hawthorne, who has been his kind of teammate since the space cadet years. And she's pointing out that he doesn't really like working as part of a team. She's brought along a rookie. And Buzz, from the beginning, sort of says, I don't like working with rookies. I don't want to work as part of this team. And so you go, okay, this is a guy who needs to learn to receive help. Things start to go wrong. The rookie offers some help. He declines to be helped. At one level, I would say that if there is a character kind of lack, and the lack in the characters that they won't be helped by others, then you can reveal that. But it was all too soft and jokey at the beginning. It's like, don't look at the rookie because he'll give me the sad eyes. And then, of course, the rookie gives him the sad eyes. So it's played as humour at the beginning. And then just incessantly throughout the film, we're just told over and over again, Buzz is going to try and do things by himself. And, of course, he will fail unless he receives assistance from the rest of his teammates.
Yeah. From a boringly technical point of view, if you were trying to make a movie that was more entertaining, you would probably have your first act where he is just properly heroic. And we don't yet see the downside of his heroism. So there is a version of this movie which would be excellent and exciting and probably more what we were hoping for, where the message would be even heroes need help sometimes. It feels like vegetables. It feels like eat your vegetables because vegetables are good for you, and you don't have to have meat for it to be a nice meal. And that is absolutely true. But if you're taking your 9-year-old out for a birthday treat and they really wanted burgers, and you give them vegetables, then you could say, "But you don't need to have meat to have a nice meal." It's like, yeah, but it is my birthday, so that's not really what I've signed up for.
There is a lack of faith. I suppose that probably comes out through lots of it, but there is a lack of faith that having a hero is a good thing, and you don't get moments where you say, "Wow, remember when Buzz Lightyear did that? I want to recreate that scene." In the woods when I'm sort of off playing on a Saturday afternoon. I'm thinking, no, almost all of it, Buzz was learning his lesson, and as the audience, so were we. And it's moralistic, which from a Christian point of view is pretty deathly, because we don't believe in that good morals save us. We believe that a savior saves us. So from a Christian point of view, your Christian action hero is the one who saves those who can't save themselves, rather than, and I quote, "We don't need you to save us, we need you to join us."
Right.
So remember that bit when they're in some kind of mining facility, and they set off an alarm, and each character, it's quite a cool setup really, each character is suddenly surrounded by this kind of impenetrable safety cone that they can't get out of, and so all 5 characters are trapped in these cones. But then if the cones touch, the characters jump into a single cone together. So of course several of them do it by mistake, and then Buzz ends up being separate from them. And he has this plan to save them. He's by the door. I'll get the door open. You guys hit the button. And they don't have enough kind of ballast in the boat to kind of push this button or break the technology. And so Buzz says, "Well, if you do this, I'll save you." And then they say, "We don't need you to save us. We need you to join us." And so Buzz then...
Yeah. And that's not even the big moment of the film. But
No.
That's learning the same lesson,
Yes.
number 3.3, you know.
From a theological perspective or a soteriological perspective, the study of salvation, right? If you're thinking about salvation, okay, how is it that Christ does save us? Well, he does join us, right? So Matthew gives us the two names of Christ. He is Emmanuel, God with us, and Jesus, the Lord saves. And so you put those two names together, and the Savior becomes one of us, right? The incarnation is about kind of him making his dwelling amongst us, taking on flesh. And then as an individual in our flesh, he then goes and pays the price for our sin and rescues us out of that through his resurrection and ascension. So you do need your hero to join you at one level, but because this is a kind of fairly flat film, flat structures, there's no real hierarchy, everyone's just supposed to be members of the team. It's just that along with Buzz, they all work together to push their kind of isolation cone and smash into the wall. So we don't need you to save us, because actually we can sort of save ourselves if you're with us. And that's the kind of hero we want, is someone who's exactly the same as us. And our salvation is going to come from teamwork and acceptance of each other, rather than being rescued by, as the aliens from Toy Story 1 would say, a stranger from the outside.
Yeah. So in this movie, Buzz Lightyear is emphatically not a hero who will save us. He's emphatically not a type of Christ, because this is a world that doesn't believe in those. He is a member of the team. He is one of us. He's, at best a fellow apostle, but he's certainly not anything more than that. And his attempts to be more than that is antisocial and misguided. And I guess, therefore, this is a movie that doesn't believe in heroes because, segue, it is a movie that does not believe in villains either. Is that fair?
Ooh, I like the way you did that. Yes, if we're going on to villains, well, who did we have for the Lightyear villain? We had Emperor Zurg, who made his first appearance in Toy Story 2. And Emperor Zurg is just sort of hell-bent on destroying everything with his army of robot soldiers. And in this movie, the grand reveal is that when Buzz finally comes face-to-face, tete-a-tete, goes head-to-head, toe-to-toe with Emperor Zurg reveals himself to be, in fact, simply Buzz Lightyear from a different timeline. It kind of, at that point, it just becomes really uninteresting. If there's an external, take some of this sort of storytelling theory stuff seriously, you've got the external struggle, and then you've got the hero's internal struggle. And in this, you just have the hero's internal struggle played out bigger. And in that way, it becomes a very uninteresting film, because there's no real threat other than the threat that we are to ourselves. There's no real evil to contend with out there. There's different interpretations, and hopefully we can act now in the present to make a better future. As long as we do that as part of a team. Again, you're being taught a lesson by Pixar, and that lesson is not especially subtle.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising because my ears pricked up when you said, I hang on your every word, Nate, obviously, but when you said that makes it less interesting, the fact that the villain is himself, as it were, initially you just think, no, isn't that more interesting? Because some boring bad villain who's just clearly was bullied at school or something, that's no fun, and therefore this isn't that. But actually, you're right. We've already established, as it were, that Buzz Lightyear is kind of the bad guy because he won't play as a team. There's a moment when he's about to hand over the energy source so that they can go back and erase the timeline so that that they can be space rangers again, or that he can be a space
Yeah.
ranger again, and that his now valued team members will be erased from existence, which doesn't propose any existential problems because they won't exist. He's not killing them; they just won't exist. Even though we've established that they matter, and that's all fine. But you just think, I don't believe for a second that this Buzz is really struggling with this one. If we'd started out with a Buzz who is a hero but a bit of a jerk, who's a bit full of himself, as opposed, and he has to learn the lesson of teamwork and thinking slightly less of himself. There's a bit of vanity in that hero, and that would be fine. And actually, what's sweet about Toy Story 2 is that the Buzz Lightyear that's fresh out of the packet is a real try hard, blow hard.
Yeah.
That our Buzz is already like, oh man, did I really sound like that? Oh wow,
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you really did. So we kind of needed that Buzz, and that is a sort of Buzz who would be tempted by his future self, to erase everybody and be the hero. And nobody died, and he could have justified that, but nah.
And the fact that as a character, when we first see Buzz, he's far too nice a guy.
Yeah.
He's he takes himself seriously, and he takes the role of Space Ranger seriously, and he does his little monologue into his wrist, and then that's made fun of by Alicia Hawthorne. So his team make fun of him, and he's slightly sort of embarrassed by the whole thing, sort of goes, oh no, don't worry about that. So he's actually fairly self-aware. I take myself a bit too seriously, and I'm a bit too kind of process oriented, and maybe a bit of a stickler for the rules, and but he already knows all these things about himself at the beginning of the film, which is why he won't look the rookie in the eye. And so he's explicitly verbalizing, here are my character flaws, here are the things that I'm sort of struggling with. You want someone who's oblivious to that at the beginning of a film like this. If you're going to tell this story about this kind of Buzz Lightyear who needs to learn to accept the help of others, make him a jerk. Make him angry with other people, not just sort of a little bit disappointed that things didn't work out. And the real challenge, I think, with this was that they cast Chris Evans kind of as Chris Evans, very conscious of his own privilege and position and concern to, involve others and to be part of a team and be very kind of moral and ethical and all that sort of stuff. We wanted to see a bit of a jerk who needs to learn something.
I mean, once again, we've seized upon the curious choices they've made in storytelling and how they aren't giving us the peaks and troughs that you would expect. But, what is this movie saying about the fact that there isn't a villain really, and it's not that we now have sympathy for the devil. There is no devil. Is this yet another example of there is no true enemy? It's just you may need to be re-educated because what is this saying about that kind of world?
I think in some ways it's very similar to Frozen 2, when Elsa hears the call to go into the unknown, and she's called to go to Otterhollen, this sort of glacier where the north wind meets the sea, and she must go there to listen to the voice that's been calling her and to meet with the one who holds her destiny. And what does she find when she gets there? And you can watch the making of Frozen 2 documentary. It's hilarious watching them scrabble around trying to make something work. And as we've talked about on the Frozen 2 episode, it doesn't really work. Is that who does Elsa meet when she gets into Otterhollen? She meets Elsa. And in a worldview which is so self-referential, and you only have to come to terms with yourself. You have to learn to love yourself. You have to learn to accept yourself. You have to learn. So it's all incredibly kind of navel gazing, introspective, and that's what you get with Lightyear when Zurg turns out to be Buzz. It's just an echo chamber of human voices, And so good and evil can only ever be the amplification of what we recognize as good and evil within ourselves. So I think sort of Freud says things like, God is just saying man in a loud voice. Because there's only these human beings on the planet, we are the top and tail, the extent of true evil and true good must be within our own grasp. And therefore the real villain you must fight is yourself, and the real salvation must be from yourself. There's no magic in this film, and maybe this brings us on to the creativity point, is to say that it's a flat film in lots and lots of ways, because it doesn't take you through the peaks and the troughs. It doesn't show you evil as evil. It doesn't really... The terrible things that Zurg and his robot army are doing are all implied. You don't see any kind of atrocity or tragedy or destruction. We're just sort of told they're probably going to bring this, and therefore there's a much less satisfying payoff when that is confronted and dealt with, when it's overcome. So you don't get the depths of the pit. You don't have real suffering or struggle, and because of that, you don't actually have any sense of the joy of victory and of the vanquish of that which is evil. So it sort of sits along, sort of floating in this, very flat level, human story, and it's just not that fun. It's just not that interesting. It's not that engaging. You're sort of a bit bored.
And it's because it's 6 episodes of television. That a movie is an epic odyssey where someone is pulled out of their regular day to day and has to go on this incredible journey and defeat the monster. And in actual fact, this is just a series of occasions in which Buzz Lightyear needs to stop trying to be a hero and accept help. And that's a TV show. TV shows are about teams and clashing personalities who have to learn to trust each other and that kind of thing. And there's no real room for this once in a lifetime epic thing. It's not. It's a very different medium, really. So I can imagine this being the Lightyear show, where they're stuck in this space station, and it's another day in the life, a bit like Monsters, University or whatever it was. There was that spin-off series where
Monsters at Work. So
Monsters at Work. Yeah, it's kind of the day to day, and I think that's what's going on here. It just feels like, and yet, ironically, the great TV show, as we speak, is Stranger Things, which has the epic scale of good versus evil that you get in a movie.
Now, we did mention this in terms of the UK premiere bonus spoiler-free episode, but just the fact that Stranger Things, half of the joy that comes out of it is the fact that it's set in the 80s and it's got this soundtrack, and you're looking at these things, and the technology that's being used to to work as a team are these radios, and like they at one point they have to use I think it was in the first episode of the latest series, they have to use the database of the Blockbuster video store to find out who this person is. You think, oh wow, of course, that's a really interesting use of the confines of technological advancement within that thing, to say, oh, here's how they could solve that problem. And it would have been really fun to see Lightyear as a film set in 1995, and that if it had felt like it was a film set in 1995, I think it would have been a lot more fun. You needed something else. But anyway, to get back to the third point, which is on the creativity, this is something we discussed on the What's Gone Wrong with Pixar episode, which is that they're hypersensitive to the social conditions of the day, and in a desperate concern to make something apparently, sort of quote unquote wholesome, in which there are all these, loving friendships within with groups of people in which people respect and care for one another within the story, that they aren't doing anything very interesting, very creative. And this might take a while to unpack this, but I think we kind of have to address the lesbian marriage that's within this, the lesbian relationship that was within this. I think that is actually quite indicative of the lack of creative spark that is within Pixar. So I don't want to go into too much detail about the birds and the bees, but if you watch this film with your children and they realize that this Alicia Hawthorne has got engaged to a woman, and then next time Buzz comes back, Alicia Hawthorne is pregnant, you kind of might need to explain how is it possible that two women produced a baby. In fact, that requires, in one sense, more explanation than the sci-fi hyperleap time goes slower when you're speeding round a sun, and therefore Buzz has only aged 4 minutes, whereas everyone else has aged 4 years. The way in which, how do a woman and a woman have a baby, that requires explanation. Now, of course, it's not explained because they want to say, hey, this is perfectly normal. There are loads of, I'm sure, the Pixar, staff team and wider family is made up of hundreds of lesbian couples, and that many of them have adopted children or have had children through, IVF or whatever it might be. And so they're all very aware that this is normal and we're just showing it as normal. I think we all know that it's not the natural order of things. It's not the way in which human life is developed and grown and created. And so there's something, I think, about a film like this which it doesn't have a creative spark because it doesn't really have a place for male and female. It wants to make everyone the same and to say, we can make it work. Does that need more? It probably needs more unpacking than that, but...
Well, I think, in a way, that was the thing that really jumped out at me. Obviously, there was the same-sex relationship, which, in one sense, I'm the one who says people shouldn't be offended by comedy which describes the world as it is rather than the world as you'd like it to be. So, there have been 1,000 sitcoms in the last 40 years where there have been heterosexual couples who aren't married, who are living together. So, if we apply the same standard on that, then Friends is unwatchable and all that kind of stuff. So, we're in danger of having a very serious double standard which looks homophobic because it is. So that's true on one level. But on the other level, I think I was more... What we're seeing is the idea that men and women can just do the same things. So, complementarians would stress the idea of different roles between genders. And actually, I think it's more fundamental. I think it's different natures rather than roles. But I need to sort of get my head around what that means. But maybe because everything's amplified by tech, it just means that power-assisted steering means that a man and a woman can drive a car in exactly the same way, and there's no difference. Or
right.
So the fact that you've got a male and a female space ranger, and they are interchangeable, and then you've got this ragtag underdog bunch where you've got that former criminal who is female, although it's quite hard to tell to begin with, and in one sense maybe we're invited to not really fully understand. And then you've got this sort of cowardly Australian guy. Their gender is irrelevant as far as their character is concerned and their role within the film. And I can't see... And that's now normal in every movie. So I wasn't surprised to see it, but I became most conscious of it watching this movie, that now boys and girls are the same. And they're not. Yeah.
And what's very frustrating in this particular film is that the story they want to tell really doesn't lend itself to having Alicia Hawthorne's character in a lesbian relationship. Okay. So what is she going to be for the majority of the film, right? After the first act, she is the grandmother of Izzy.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that is and she's this, sort of long, this friend of Buzz, and you grow up together, and that's a sort of emotional sort of tug for him. But she is the grandmother of Izzy, right? So in lots of ways, as a character, she needs to be marked by two things. She needs to be marked by a profound level of capability as a space ranger. Mm-hmm. That's why she got the role that she's got, okay? And as a grandmother. When it comes to mother lesbian, pick one. Right? There's almost a choice that is being made in those sort of decisions to pursue lesbian relationships that means that you aren't going to have children. Now, of course, people can adopt children and sort of other ways of getting pregnant, which are outside of that relationship. But it doesn't work for the story to say there is this grandmother character who, by the way, also happened to be a lesbian. You think, well, that you're really forcing it now. You're putting something in that doesn't naturally lend itself to the telling of this story.
We've been pretty down on it, and I guess fundamentally, I watched the film. I'm not that excited about my kids seeing it. I'm certainly not paying to take them to the cinema. But yeah, so how are we going to talk to our kids about it? Because they are going to watch it sooner or later, or maybe they're not. I don't know.
I think we've got to acknowledge the fact lots and lots of kids are going to want to see this film, and lots of Christian parents are going to take them to see it, and I don't think anyone needs to see this. I mean, I don't have the same reaction to it as I did to Toy Story 4. Because just the outright shock and betrayal of that film, but that lots of people are going to see this, and as Christians, we want to investigate the stories that we share with our children, and we want to think about them. You might want to draw out this need to work as a team, right? You might want to draw that out. You actually won't need to draw that out because the film hit you over the head with it so many times. But you might end up having a conversation about Emperor Zurg and, if Emperor Zurg is Buzz, what does that do? How do we think about evil? And, do we prefer films with proper, bad guys and bad gals in, so Mother Gothel from Tangled, as I always say, when Rapunzel takes the saucepan and turns on Mother Gothel, that's a great heroic moment. She confronts evil and darkness. There isn't that sense here at all. So there are interesting conversations to have about that, and maybe about our sinful nature and how does Christ rescue us from our sins and rescue us from ourselves. In lots of ways, we need to die to the flesh. We actually need to be crucified with Christ on the cross and to be raised to new life. So there are conversations you could have with your children about that, I suppose. I suppose a really interesting conversation to have around this seeming lack of creative spark, and of course the Alicia Hawthorne being a lesbian who is also a grandmother, is maybe to go back to look at Genesis 1 and the creation of man. And God made male and female in his image. Okay, so these are two opposites which have been made to complement one another, and that's the process by which we have more human beings. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. The two become one flesh, and that's the way in which babies are made. And that it seems bizarre to be, don't start. It seems bizarre that is a conversation which would need to be had off the back of an animated film.
Animated science fiction Pixar movie. and
yet it's one that children need to understand. That's how human biology works. That's how God has established us as male and female. And that's how they came into the world. They came into the world because of the male and female becoming one flesh. That union is what brings them about.
I guess you could keep reading on to the next chapter as well and say, what should Adam have done? So if Adam was going to be a hero in the Garden of Eden, when evil came, what should he have done?
Yeah.
Should he have asked for help? Or should he have grabbed the nearest branch and run at the snake and beat the living daylights out of it and chased it away? What do heroes do? They protect.
Yeah.
They destroy evil. They fight evil.
Yeah.
Maybe he should have gone to God. Maybe he should have prayed, and he should have, What should Adam have done?
Yeah.
Anything.
But
what did he do? Nothing.
Yeah.
I've written some Substacks about that as well. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to read more rants about those sorts of things.
And it was interesting that they Lightyear and Hawthorne have this kind of finger bump thing when they say to infinity and beyond. And I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. They're going to bring this back. It's in the trailer, and they sort of do it a few times within the film. And I thought that in some ways is reminiscent of the Sistine Chapel ceiling and the creation of Adam, when God and man are sort of reaching out towards one another. You think, oh, that's interesting, but interesting as well that it is this kind of meeting of equals and basically two things which are the same, right? Not to get too graphic, but of course, two fingers pointing in towards one another is the same thing. It's not that one is being held by the other.
Yeah.
And there's no real connection when those things just touch together, but in fact, even a handshake is the holding of one another together. And I wonder whether, if it's not too crazy to say, that this sort of finger bump thing is emblematic of the lack of creativity, the flatness, and the slight kind of joylessness of a lot of what Pixar's doing at the moment. It feels very worthy and heavy and earnest.
Yeah.
And we should all be, nicer people as a result of watching this film.
In a way, I think that image there you've given us of the Sistine Chapel, though, it's God and man touching.
Yeah.
But now, it's been replaced with this idea of two people, two humans touching. We there is no one else to touch.
Yeah.
And you could say, this is a lovely vision of complementarity where you've got a black woman and a white man touching. But no, this movie has established the fact that they're the same anyway. So it's not like it's not a message of complementarity or unity despite diversity. And it's like, no, same. Exactly. There is no transcendence.
Yeah. The most exciting part of the film, I think, is that first bit when you see it says, in 1995, a boy named Andy received a Buzz Lightyear toy after watching a movie. This is that movie. I was like, do you remember how good Toy Story was? Right? And it is properly transcendent because you have Andy who can inscribe his name on the boot of his toys. And these toys can see that they are connected together, not because they're all exactly the same and they all sort of, can bump fingers, but because they bear the imprint of Andy on their boots. And that the appeal, the constant sort of pleading with the toys is to be the toys that Andy needs them to be and to be played with by Andy. And I was thinking this as I was sort of on the way to work this morning, that, the opening play scene within Toy Story 3 when the train is going off the rails and One-Eyed Pete and Evil Dr. Porkchop, and it's all kind of played out with lasers, and they're going to blow up the bridge, and the train's going to fall down, and then Buzz Lightyear comes out from the canyon, deep within the canyon when it looks like all is lost, and he holds up this train, rescues the train, and sets everyone at safety. It's like that in 4 minutes, a story that came from the mind of the child Andy is probably a better film than Lightyear. I'm more excited by, the heroism and the vanquishing of evil that happens in that tiny little setup for Toy Story 3 than I was by nearly 2 hours of this film. So I suppose the thing is, go back and watch Toy Story 1, 2, and 3. That's my advice.
Yeah. Even better, maybe stop short at 2. And I didn't like 3 very much, but that's a very good way in which to end this podcast. As you can hear, we weren't that thrilled about it. And if you were wondering why you didn't love it, then hopefully we've partly explained that. And you can, I think we've learning recently through this podcast that you just have an honest discussion with your kids about why you didn't like it or what you were disappointed by. Yeah. Because I think that's what they want, is they want a discussion, and they do want to know what you think, although not for as long as you might think they should want to know what you think, before you just go off and have a game of something. So watch the movie. If you watch the movie, have a chat about it, and then maybe revisit it later, or and they're going to end up watching it again at some point, and then you can have a different conversation with them. Thanks very much for listening. Speak to you next time. Cheerio.
Bye.
To infinity and beyond. Oh, I just don't want to say that anymore now.